So how I anticipate this working is we're going to have ushers on either side of the sanctuary. If you have questions you want to ask, if you would please go to the outside aisle, and they will field those questions, and we'll just kind of bounce back and forth. And don't wait until somebody's done to make your way out so that we're not burning up a lot of time, people coming and going. So if there's something you want to ask, just go to one of them. They will hold on to the mic for you so you don't have to worry about that. We have learned some lessons in the past, so they will maintain possession of the mic, and they will help you as you need. So just come to them, don't wait, and line up.
So as we're waiting for the first question, were you going to say something?
I was going to say something first, just briefly. Talking about the prayer that Andrew prayed, the prayer that Julian prayed, he says a year ago, it made sense in that time. I think, sometimes God, he's so gracious to not take us at our words. Sometimes when we're complaining and we're not doing so well, sometimes he graciously overlooks us. But I think that when we pray the kind of prayer that you prayed, he's like, yes, I'm going to take you at your word. Later on, we might feel like, what were we praying? But that was such a good prayer. And yeah.
He catches us at our best. Oh, I saw that. I caught it. And then if you regress a bit later, yeah, but I saw what you did. It was really, really good. I'll just tell you, as we're waiting for a question, one of the things that people say, some who have read our book, they come up and say, she doesn't want me to say it. Should I say it anyway? Should I? Yeah, okay.
He has said enough good things about me today.
No,
My
but
pride
anyway,
doesn't need this.
But anyway, they say, Andrew, thank you, those who've read the book. Andrew, thank you for being so transparent about your weakness. Norrine, you're so heroic. So just so you know who the real hero is.
Yes, I would like to hear just a little more about your relationship with the other prisoners.
Yeah, so I was, there's a group that's been accused of leading the coup in Turkey called the Gulen movement. And they're all very strong Muslims, and whatever they do politically, they also are a missionary society, an Islamist missionary society. They started schools in 170 countries around the world, spreading the Turkish version of Islam. And so I was accused of being part of this Islamist group, and I was always kept in cells with people from that group. Now, this means that I was with people who are very devoted to Islam. Those are the prisoners I was kept with. And I was accused of being part of their group. They knew very well that I wasn't part of their group because they were part of the group. And so they knew it was a false accusation. It also means that I was in the same cells with a bunch of Muslim missionaries. And I was the only one who wasn't a Muslim, so I was the object of their attention. But generally, it was... they knew I was a believer, and there wasn't an issue. As my case dragged on, and after President Trump asked for my release, there was a day of waiting when it kind of blows up in the media. Why, when there's so little time, you saw this in the video, when there's so little time, they only had like over 20 minutes in this summit between Trump and the Turkish president. Why did the American president ask for this priest 3 times? Who is this guy? When there are so many issues to discuss, why the focus on this guy? And so it's all in the media, all this speculation, and we're thinking, okay, is he going to release me to have a better relationship with Trump? Well, he didn't. The answer was he doubled down. They kept me for another 17 months after that. And then there was just this spewing out of all this vile stuff in the media. Nationally, it was a big national issue about how, I'm a spy. And before that, it's, Andrew's with the Gulen movement. That's not a problem for my cellmates because they know it's not true. But now I'm a spy. I'm supporting a terrorist group that's a Kurdish group that has fought with Turkey a lot. I want to cut the heads off of Turks. I'm a CIA agent. All kinds of evil things being spread. So now some of the people that I was in the cell with who were, before some of them were positive toward me, some were neutral, some were a bit negative, but now there was more negativity because they could very easily believe conspiracies like this. And so after a few months, that's when I was moved into maximum security so that I could, probably for my own protection, because now instead of being in a cell with 20 plus people, I was in a cell with just one other prisoner. And that guy was actually, for those of you who've read the book, he was a blessing to me. Very strong, committed Muslim, but just a very good man. One thing that he told me once that stuck in my mind is he said, Andrew, stop worrying about what the Turkish president says. Stop worrying about what Trump says. Stop worrying about what the media says. You're not getting out of here until the day God says you get out. I was saying, well, I said, Najat, you would be a better Christian than I am if only you followed Jesus. It's the right perspective.
So there was everybody knew that he was a Christian. There was a level of witness, definitely. No clear turning to the Lord. But this last man, Najat, they would have a discussion about the Trinity, for example. That's a very difficult one. And then a couple days later, he would just out of the blue say, Andrew, it's just not possible, and just kind of bring it up. So clearly this was in his mind, and we pray for his salvation.
Another question over here. Hello, Bob Payton here. I've got a question about, do you have communication with the church or the churches that you've started?
Go ahead.
Yes, so the Dirilish church that you saw here is being led by a Turkish couple. Very bold, very brave, because this church was in the news a lot, and so it's difficult. Actually, a lot of people are hearing the gospel there. They're taking New Testaments. They're being prayed for. They're coming to faith. It's been hard to keep people there because it's just such an infamous church. A lot of things circulating. There are secret police there and whatnot. So often these people then go to other churches.
They come to faith in this church because there are a lot of visitors, but then they move on to a different church where they won't have the same scrutiny.
So that's the painful part of it. But as the pastor there, he says this church is blessing Turkey. There are a lot of people coming by there.
By the way, I love seeing all these young people here at the front, and I talked to some of them in the break, and I'm waiting for questions from you guys.
There's no dumb question.
Tim, hang on just a second here.
I have some comments. First of all, I'd like to say that I read your book and I couldn't put it down. And that this is a story not about a man who broke, but a man who overcame by the grace of God. And I so much admire the both of you. But the message to the church today, I think, and I think of all the people here, and I know a lot of people have been on the mission field, and I think of the brother that was in Saudi Arabia, was also a prisoner. In all of this, the Lord is writing a story. And that story is a lot bigger than Andrew and Norrine, than Bob Payton and Betty and Vic Hildebrand, a whole bunch of other people, Bob Tidd, a brother that was in Saudi Arabia. It's much bigger because the Lord is preparing a body, his bride, that's going to live and reign for him forever.
So what you're saying is this story is not about Andrew and Norrine, it's about Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah, so I also had a question on the church. You answered some of that. Wanted to update on Turkey. How's the Turkey church doing as overall growth? But even before that, so Norrine, during the imprisonment, what was the church doing, or how was the environment there? Like obviously you experienced a lot of persecution directly, like you said, in the house church.
Yeah, so right now the church is not underground in Turkey at this point. It doesn't need to be, and so in fact they're doing as much as they can across Turkey while it's still daylight, to walk while it's daylight, as it says in the Bible. When the Lord, I'm going to back up a little bit and say when the Lord spoke to Andrew about harvest in 2009, and then we started to make preparations for that, we started to really seek the Holy Spirit, and one thing that would come up is that the harvest was going to come in difficult times in Turkey. So we didn't know exactly what that would look like, but we expected difficult times. The Turkish, there's been quite a bit of freedom in Turkey compared to surrounding Muslim countries, but very, very little interest. They've been very hard. And that's kind of shifting now, where the freedom is decreasing and the interest is increasing a little bit. Obviously, people have been sowing there. It's not a simple answer, but there are two things that I think have contributed to really quite an increase in the number of professions of faith, seekers and professions of faith in the last couple years across Turkey is what we hear. One is the prayer that poured in from around the world into Turkey. People are praying for him, and however God does it, I think he was somehow applying that to Turkey, somehow. And the other thing is that they're going through really hard times, politically, economically, and it's a lot of the repression that's being done by the current Turkish president is being done in the name of Islam. And so increasingly young people are coming by the church, and not just our church, but others too, and they're saying, I saw this even the last year before he was released, a lot of young people, and they're coming in, they're saying, I don't know what I believe anymore. I don't want to be a Muslim. I'm a deist, I'm an atheist, and they're coming seeking. So God is at work. It's not the harvest yet, but the beginnings are there. Did I answer all of that, all of the question?
So the other question was, how did the church feel when Andrew was in prison?
Yeah, there was a lot of fear. The idea was, what's next? Who's next?
And part of what the Turkish government was doing when they first arrested me, when they held on to me, I think when they arrested us, there was an order to deport us. So they were starting to want to get rid of some of the missionaries that had a higher profile. And so we fit that category, but then they held on to me. And I think the initial idea behind in the first couple months probably was, let's use this to intimidate other missionaries so that they'll leave. And some did, because that's not part of the cost that many had counted in before. Because up until I was put in prison, no one had been put in prison for their faith, in living memory. And so some people did leave. And they also wanted to intimidate, I believe, local believers, Turkish believers. And the message was kind of, if we can do this to an American, just think what we can do to you. Because the U.S. is an ally, and they're part of NATO, Turkey is. And so if we can do this to one of them, we can do anything we want to you. And just to cause fear in the Turkish church and among their leaders.
So there was fear, but those who stayed, I think, grew stronger. The church continued to meet, but we did lose a few, not many, but we did lose a few people, and that was difficult. They have been increasingly deporting foreign missionaries, and the Turkish believers now are seeing that if they want to continue to reach Turkey, they're the ones who need to take on the church planting efforts. And so this is a good thing that they're taking that responsibility and initiative. But if you think of Turkey, please pray for them.
Can I tell you another Norrine story? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So when Norrine would come to visit me, and I just want to tell you her mentality, because so she's coming. I'm in this high security prison. So when she comes, it's a large prison. So there are these high walls. There's the razor wire and the guards with submachine guns. And so she's coming into an intimidating place. And part of it is also just what it looks like, but it's this high security prison. And for her even to get in, she had to go through a number of security measures. So you think going through the airport, TSA, no, she had her iris scanned, her eyes scanned. At 2 different places, they would scan her eyes. And just all this security to get in. So it's very intimidating. So that's one factor. And the other is the shame factor, because, I'm across the country now. They know me as the terror priest, and this dark person. And here's the wife. Everyone knows she's coming to visit this, hateful man. And so now she wasn't ashamed, obviously, but that's what she was coming into, an environment of intimidation and of shame. And she would come, and I'm sharing this because it's a picture of her, and I like to let you know what she's like because she's amazing, but also because the mentality is this picture of her that I carried with me in prison in my mind. She would come to the prison, and she would say, I am a daughter of the king. This is how her mindset she would come in with. I'm a daughter of the king, and I'm here to see a son of the king. And then she would put her head up and walk in with her head up high.
So there was probably some resisting the shame factor there. And I will just say that I came to try to adopt that attitude when I would come to see him. I didn't start out that way. There was a learning curve. I mean, the first time I was just in tears. I can't believe I'm going to see him like on the phone and whatever. And so there's a process.
She has a postcard or something that says, "Don't forget to put on your invisible crown," something like that. So anyway, that was my picture for her walking in with her head up high as a daughter of the king, and that was an encouragement to me. Yeah.
So, Apostle Paul saw this from Tarsus in Turkey, and then Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, all that was in Turkey, and then the churches in Revelation in Turkey. Turkey has such a huge, foundation for the church. Other than not God's will that any should perish, has God showed you anything in your networking before, during, or after about His desire for that nation and those people? Because Turkey is, such a strategically, geopolitical and a Muslim nation, part of NATO. Just all the ramifications there. Has He showed you anything about the desire for the nation and the people?
Well, I mentioned last night that Turkey is very important, strategic, spiritually, because it was ahead of the Muslim world for centuries. And I think that is why this unprecedented prayer movement, so clearly if it's unprecedented, something that is God initiated, and God, we see how He initiated, drove it, sustained it over a long period of time with great intensity, and focused it into the country of Turkey because I think of that history. And the way I've thought about it is at some distance into my imprisonment, Satan suddenly said, "Oh no, what did I do?" And he realized that he had made a big mistake in throwing me into prison. He thought he could knock me out, which he could do very easily, but God was using this to raise up this massive prayer movement that was pouring in prayer to one of the very dark powers, principalities. I'm not talking about Turkey itself, but against the spirit that is behind the old Turkish Empire, which conquered many peoples in the name of Islam, suffocated Christianity everywhere it went, and is still one of the main powers in the Muslim world today. And so you see this spiritual confrontation taking place at a spiritual level, all of this prayer pouring in, this dark power. And I think the intention God had where there was to in some way diminish and restrict that power, which is then going to lead to that, assignment that He gave, the things He spoke to us about a harvest coming in this land. So that is one of the ways to prepare for the move there. Now, I think it goes beyond Turkey, because I think that since Turkey was the head, as God moves there, as that power is diminished at the head, it's going to affect the whole area that Turkey ruled in the name of Islam. So that is, if you just go online sometime and look up the Ottoman Empire, North Africa, the Middle East, and up into the Balkans. So it was a huge area that was under the control of Islam. And I think that we're going to see not only a powerful move of God, but that it is going to spread into all of the areas that Turkey used to rule in the name of Islam. So I think in my lifetime we will see millions of Muslims coming to Jesus in that region. Yeah. As for the future of Turkey, that's spiritually, as Norrine mentioned, everything that he showed us over the years about harvest was that it will come in difficult times. So I think our entire world, but that part of the world is going to become more turbulent. There's going to be more darkness, more wickedness, more violence, more wars. And in the midst of that, you're going to see the church grow tremendously. And many people want to leave darkness and come into light.
Norrine, how was that for you? You know, you stayed in Turkey, right? The entire time. How was that for you, and what did your daily life look like walking through that?
My efforts were for him. He became the priority. So I was trying to figure out what that looked like. It looked like getting prayer from people, trying to get in touch with the U.S. Embassy. That was easy, but just trying to figure out how all this works. And then I realized there are groups that actually help with this kind of thing. There are different ways to go about it. So it was just a big learning curve of how to deal with this. But he was my priority. I was thinking, how can I see him? How can I get in to visit him? We had to find a lawyer. She was kind of...
Explain your hand.
Yeah. Anyway, there were just a lot of practical things that had to do with his case, and then the ministry was still going on, and so we had somebody who was the assistant pastor, and he really then led the ministry. But the truth is, the two of us were leading it together, and so as I was able to be involved, I was involved. There were times when I remember was at home and I'm thinking, oh, I'm so down. I just don't want to see anybody today. And in the, how can I go to church and face people? But in about the 13 minutes, there's a 13-minute walk to our church, I don't know, it was the grace of God is all I can say. And I approach it and I start to see the believers gathering, and my heart is just lifted. And so many times the Lord would give grace to, greet them and hug them and ask them even how they were. I told them I didn't always want to be asked because it was just tired and just emotionally exhausting. But I realized that I was in over my head, and I was completely dependent on God. And I just, I would say, put my hand up first thing in the morning.
Actually, I want to say something there was a transition that took place, and that's what I wanted you to explain, how you started and how you ended up.
Yeah. Realizing I had to do this, I couldn't do this on my own, and I was able to sleep, praise God, but I would wake up and I'm still in this nightmare. It was so hard to get out of bed, and I would just put my hand up first thing, and say, Lord, I have got to go through this day with you. And saying, Lord, committing every part of the day to him and everything. Over the months, took a long time, but there was a slow transition to saying, Lord, not you come with me through this day, but Lord, you lead the day, and I'm with you. And I still struggle with that, because one thing I don't give up very easily is my time, my plans, my things that I want to do. And to say, Lord, you direct this day. You take charge of the schedule today. That was definitely a transition. Yeah. Did it?
So she would start off, God, these are all the things I need to do. And she does stretch her hand out and say, take my hand and come with me through the day. And then it turns into, God, you take me through the day into all the appointments that you want to take me into. Yeah. I lean into God. How I was showing you, I lean. She lifts her hand up so that God can take her hand. So, those are just, some of the physical working this out that actually helps.
Yeah. Andrew mentioned how the prophetic words are difficult. And, what is from God, what isn't? What can we really claim? That's just very, very difficult. But I did spend time praying into those and claiming those. And then somebody gave me a good prayer, Mary's prayer. What she said, be it unto me according to what you say. And that is at once claiming it, saying, I want it, or what you're saying, claiming it, and also a surrender to whatever his word actually is, if those aren't the words. So that was a helpful thing. But anything that I got from the believers, because I had the believers there with me, praying for me, praying with me, that makes such a big difference. I would try to, I need to be strengthened so I could bring it to him.
Did your mindset change or your mindset of God change before prison compared to like after prison?
Mindset of
Your perspective on God?
yeah, I would say before I was a lot more sure of many things, and now I'm less sure of them. But actually,
But more committed and more sure. And
yeah. So I'm less sure of many things, but I'm more sure of a few things, and so I don't have certainty about a lot of things. I still have a lot of questions, but I don't ask the questions very much because day after day I practice not asking the questions, and so now I'm really much more keyed into surrender and not questioning God. But
so just as a practical thing, maybe it was more like, oh, surely God will intervene. Surely he'll do this. Or, he won't let this happen or something like that. And it's like, well, we don't actually know. There's a lot we don't know. But now it's, you're more sure, for example, on, yes, this is what I need to do in the uncertainty. I still need to press and be devoted.
yeah. So I'm just throwing this out as it comes to my mind. One of the things people often focus on is God's faithfulness. Oh, Andrew, this is the story of God's faithfulness. Yeah, I guess so. That's not how it felt to me. I felt more like the emphasis is on my faithfulness. And this isn't to say God was not faithful, because his faithfulness underlies my faith. If he's not sustaining me, then I cannot respond. So it's not to minimize that as much as to say the actual experience that I'm going through, I'm not focused on his faithfulness because I'm not feeling it, I'm not seeing it, I'm not discerning it very easily, I'm not understanding what his faithfulness looks like in my context. But I know that what he's expecting from me. And so I'm focused every day on, oh God, you're faithful, you're faithful. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, oh God, help me to be faithful. I need to be faithful. Give me strength to be faithful. I need to press on. I need to press on. And so that was much more the mindset. And I don't know, coming out, I seem to have less content to my relationship or my faith in a sense, but more of a determination of just, I'm so committed. I belong to you. One of the things, so I'm in prison and I'm trying to think, what promises in the Bible apply to me? Which of them do I think are I can expect in this life and not just in heaven? And I really couldn't find any, really, that I could apply to myself. People often will say, and I had this verse with me on this little piece of plastic that stayed with me that Norrine had given me as she left me to leave the detention. She left this with me, and they allowed me to keep it throughout my imprisonment. Romans 8, whatever it is, 8:28. God works all things together for good for those who love him are called according to his purpose, or however your translation says it. And yes, he does. But that good may come at a very high cost. And you may not see that good, him work. You won't see the results of it, maybe in this life, it may be in eternity. And you may have a long time here on earth where you're not experiencing the good of all of those things that God is working together for the ultimate good. Does that make sense? And so how do I hang on to that verse? I can say, yes, in eternity, but what about right now when I'm in pain and I'm struggling right now? And, theologically, I don't want to get too much into theology, but, if you're a Calvinist and you think, that I'm predestined and, I'm going to heaven, and But how do I know that I am? Because if I deny Jesus or slide away from him, then people will say, well, see, you just weren't predestined. You weren't saved. Well, what if, and so how do I know? I don't have a guarantee that I am. And someone can say, well, an Arminian, well, just make sure right now, Jesus, and, you get saved right now. Yeah, but what if I turn away? Because that was one of my big fears is, my Muslim cellmate said, Andrew, you will become a Muslim. And I'd say, oh no, I have no desire to become a Muslim. I have no desire to turn my back on Jesus. But what if in my discouragement and in my confusion and I don't have other believers to speak truth to me over time, what if I slide away? And this was one of the reasons why I was suicidal in my first year, because I thought, wait, Jesus said, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Better to go to heaven with one hand than go to hell with two hands. Yeah. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be better if I just kill myself now? And it's a defeat for sure, but at least then I'm going to be with God rather than I hang on for years and I because of the wounded heart and my problems with God and my questions, I end up just sliding away over time. Not intentionally, but if that happens, then, oh God, I end up in Islam. So let me kill myself now and make sure. So that's a very twisted way of thinking, but that's how I was thinking. It was wrong, but I was very confused. And so, the fear, God, what can I count on? What can I hold on to? And ultimately I thought, well, if I'm an Arminian, I still think I can fall away. If I'm a Calvinist, I don't know if I'm saved anyway, because I won't know until whether I persevere or not. I'm confused. What promises apply to me? And in the end, I just came down to this. God, I don't know. But if you don't carry me through, I'm not going to make it. And so if you choose not to carry me through, what can I do to change that? But I had such a strong sense over time, just reading Romans 8, that God had chosen me, that I belonged to him. It wasn't a promise. There was just something that grew in my heart saying, God is holding me, and I belong to him, and he has chosen me. And I have a fly going around me.
I see that.
So I don't think that's helpful to anybody, but it was just thinking, ultimately, I am held by God. I am abiding in him, but I don't have enough strength to make sure that I abide. But he is going to hold me and make sure that I do.
Yeah, before we go on to the next thing, yesterday Andrew was saying how he had grace, but it was mostly an unfelt grace. It didn't make the difference in the level of peace and joy that he would have liked or that I would have liked when I was also being held. And just saying how it's not an anesthetic, it is at times, but at times you just feel the suffering. His mother would say, Andrew, it's suffering. It's suffering. Yes, it is suffering for
So
Jesus.
let me actually explain that. Was that in the video? No. She came to visit me, and early on, she was allowed to see me this time. And I'm just starting to break. I'm in solitary confinement. They let me see her, and I'm crying. Mom, look how hard this is. I'm breaking. Just crying. And she said, Andrew, of course you're crying. This is suffering. If it were easy, they wouldn't call it suffering. This is normal. Because, see, I don't think I should. I think that I should have the joy and strength and grace, and I'm just going to kind of float above it, say, yeah, this is hard, Mom, but hey, I've got grace. It wasn't like that. Since I'm telling you about my mom, I'll tell you another thing, because she's a very kingdom-minded person. And she said, I don't know I can't remember what's in the video of what I've said before, but I'll say it again. She said to me, she said, Andrew, there's a long line of people who suffered for Jesus Christ. And it's a long line that stretches back 2,000 years. And it's now your turn, my son, it is now your turn to stand in this line. It's like, Mom. A little compassion here, But and I had a really hard time, saying, okay, I'm taking my spot in this line. intentionally, because I just wanted to escape the line. But over time, you know, I mentioned Richard Wurmbrandt. There were a couple of other people who I just started to think about those who'd gone before me. Because they're an inspiration, they're an encouragement, and I would say, oh God, if they did it, I may not be as strong as they are, but that means I can do it. I should be able to do it. I have to do it. They endured, I need to endure as well. And I'm thinking about those who went before. And then I became aware, especially as I learned that so many people were praying for me, I started to think, wait, there's a line after me. There's a line coming after me. And I have to endure and leave an example of faithfulness for those who are coming after me. So that was a change of perspective. You know, encouragement from those who went before, and thinking, I have a responsibility now. And I'll just say, some of you will probably have to stand in that line as well.
So back to grace, that he was saying unfelt grace. But actually, I saw it at work in him. And one time that was very clear was in his first court session. So it was about 11, 12 hours, 13 hours that day, just in court. False witnesses and all kinds of lies, and it just felt so heavy and dark. And we're in this big, it was like a basketball court that was being used as a courtroom. So it was this big, I'm at the very back in a section, and he's at the arena. He's at the front. The prosecutor, the three judges and prosecutor are sitting up.
My lawyer's off to the side, 30, 40 feet away, so I can't talk with them. I'm just sitting alone. And then there are these rows and rows and rows of chairs, you know, behind me. And then if I look back, I can see Norrine, but I can't discern her facial features. She's that far away.
Yeah. So
and I'm alone sitting there.
And he's not supposed to, so I'm watching from the back. He's not supposed to turn around and look at me. Every so often he did, and then I'm like, you know, love you, pray, you know, look to God, whatever I can sign. But, you know, it's so heavy with all this dark stuff, and just feels terrible. And then Andrew would get up to speak because he was allowed to answer the accusations. And he was clear. His Turkish was clear. He had some just very sharp answers. I thought, that's the Holy Spirit. And just, you know, speaking truth. And I was like, this clears the air. He would sit down and collapse. You know, he wasn't feeling that grace, but I could see it at work in him. I could see it. And, you know, Jesus was in the garden, and he's
I was complaining about this. Hey, how about an angel? Jesus got an angel. Why can't I have it? You know, think of all the advantages Jesus had. He's a son of God, and, you know, I need it more. And Norrine said,
yeah, so he's in the garden, he's in agony, and an angel comes and strengthens him. And in fact, then he has the grace to go through, but he's still in agony. It's still not easy. So, you know, this was a I guess maybe a disappointment, a surprise, but what I will say is that grace was there. It was at work, and it did pull us through.
Sorry. I would love to hear what kind of emotions you felt when you were first in a corporate worship setting after you left that isolation and came back into America. What did you feel being with a body of Christ, and also did it take you a while to heal before you could share your story?
What was the first part? I missed it.
Just what the first time you were in worship. We got a bit, while he thinks about the answer, just such an appreciation for the body of Christ, for people praying for us all over that didn't know us, you know, really, really praying for us. And then there's another level, which is when you're with the believers and they're praying with you right there. You know, that's so encouraging. So I think, yeah, to be with believers again, you so miss that. You would think every Sunday, you know I'm in church, and you're missing the body.
Yeah. I came to see how important, one of the strategies God is giving to prepare for difficulties is community. With a small group, not with the whole body of Christ, you know, this idea of unity, but forming community with a small number of believers around you that can become a close-knit group that is centered on the Word, guarding the Word. Those are two phrases, the community and guarding the Word, specifically that phrase, guarding the Word because it needs guarding. And finding others, and I'll say to the young people also especially, is the friends that we choose are so important. And God is highlighting this as you go forward. Choose the right friends who have allegiance to Jesus and to obedience to Him and to His Word, because that will make a huge difference in whether you endure or not. And so I saw this in prison because, I was only Christian, and boy, did I feel the lack of having someone beside me. I would fantasize, who would I like to have with me here just to pray with me, to suffer together. And I saw my Muslim friends, some of them, when they came in, they weren't that zealous, but within a week, they were studying Arabic so they could do their prayers in Arabic. Turks don't speak Arabic, they speak Turkish. So this was learning how to read the Quran in the original language, and within a week, they were caught up. If they weren't really on fire when they went in, they left on fire for Islam because of the community. I saw one guy, when I was just in a cell with one person in maximum, and he was doing his prayers. They brought in Najat, the other guy, the Muslim, and the first one just perked up. And he started to have a lot of zeal in his prayers. Just one other believer with him. And so I really felt that, the lack of that. And it's so important for us going forward. The first time, I was a worship leader for years. I did worship in prison, as I mentioned to you. When I was released suddenly to house arrest, after Trump imposed sanctions on Turkey, they made a concession and put me in house arrest for the last 2 months. Norrine played a worship song for me, and I just started to cry. It was the first worship I'd heard in 2 years. And it just, I still carry that song with me. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd love to meet your mom. You may have to wait to heaven to get that, but that would be awesome. Norrine, you connected with officials, Secretary of State, different people doing what you could. You connected with Christians. That question earlier, what you did. I'd like to just take a little picture of Jacqueline. She wanted to get married, and she also did some really significant things on behalf of Andrew. Can you just highlight a little bit about Jacqueline?
So as Norrine thinks about that, I'm going to tell you another mom story. So my mother, this is, again, kingdom mentality. I'm going to talk about kingdom mentality tomorrow morning. But she was in a prayer meeting, and they're praying for my release. And she gets up and says, stop, don't pray for Andrew's release. We're praying for the wrong thing. Let's pray that God not release him until he's accomplished all the things he intends to through his imprisonment. And then she listed several things. He should do this, and this. And when Norrine heard the list, she said, oh, Mom, Andrew's never going to get out. But that was the mentality. It's like, wait, let's not waste this. If he's going to suffer, let God use it.
Yeah.
And don't let him out, God, with less than you intend to accomplish.
Yeah. Yes, our kids are sure that if other people compromise, she never will. They're quite sure of where she stands. Our daughter, Jacqueline, we just saw the Lord really, His grace on her, and she became kind of the face of the family here in the States. She did some interviews. I was in Turkey, and I was making efforts for Andrew, but I was trying to just be very quiet. I didn't want them to deport me. So Jacqueline did some interviews. She testified. Where did she testify? At the UN. She testified at the
Some Senate
at a
thing.
Senate thing as well. Yeah, and the Lord's grace was just on her. It was just on her to do that, for sure. So, yeah.
And she was going to get married.
She was. We had just gotten, her fiance had just sent us a picture of the ring. He had not yet given it. So we knew this was coming very soon, and then the rest happened. And so this was already in process. And then
So she got married while I was in
Yeah,
prison.
but what do you
and
do
Norrine
with
didn't
that?
tell me. She
I
was
didn't
protect-
tell him right away. Because, I mean, Christmas comes and goes, and then it's like, well, they want to get married. How long do you keep them waiting? And so I said, go ahead and we'll have a church celebration then when you get out. And she felt so, yeah, I didn't tell you right away because I knew you'd be so sad. But, how long do you keep them waiting? So all that to say is when Andrew got out and we had a church wedding, he made it about halfway up and everybody's crying. Yeah, because, those are, in the perspective of eternity, these things are small. But when you're in it, you feel like, oh, Lord, I want to be there. I cried my way through her college graduation. It was being streamed. I couldn't see it very well. And I so wanted to be there. You want to be there for your kids' special things. As I say, it's a small sacrifice, but I thought, okay. Mary had broken the precious perfume and done that. And I thought, well, that sounds better. This is something that's very precious to me. I really didn't want to give this, but we don't get to choose what we give up.
So you talk a lot about how you didn't feel the tangible presence of God while you were in prison. So once you were miraculously released and sent back to America, what was it like to then feel his presence again after having not felt it for so long?
So I'm writing a note down for tomorrow morning. Well, you're assuming that I felt his presence again. Yeah, something that I was so keyed into battle in prison that my focus was on spiritual survival, on commitment and faithfulness, and that's a very gritty, tough kind of thing.
Kind of just holding on.
Yeah, and there's something, there's kind of muscle memory. If someone is doing a task, your muscles can freeze up in that position. And I had really developed a muscle of surrender. And it's kind of, grim. If you look at the theology that came out of the communist countries, you think, wow, they're so grim. But that's what they were living in. And you look at the theology that's developed in the United States that's sometimes relentlessly positive, and you think, oh, that could only happen in a place where you don't have that kind of pressure. And they're going to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. What was I talking about?
So I think what you said is, it's almost like you're just holding on, and it's almost hard to
so I came out of
into
this
the
battle for surrender and perseverance that makes me strong, and I'm keyed in. And it was very difficult then to just kind of relax into, which is more of the soft intimacy, if we want to call it that. I had the hard intimacy of, the gentle intimacy.
Not hard and
I'm
soft
having the harsh intimacy, let's call it that, of yes, I'm persevering for you, Jesus. My heart's overlapping more with yours in suffering, and there's an intimacy to that, if you've suffered with someone. But then to move into the soft, gentle intimacy of just, oh, this is wonderful, I'm relaxing into your presence, into your arms. That is still a process, and I want it. I don't have it in the same way that I did before. And it's okay. But I still have times of when, I feel that when I can sense his presence and I'm relaxed into it. But I've also been trained to compete with horses. And that changes me a little bit. But you can have both. I want to be the madly, passionately in love warrior. And you can have that. I'm just saying it's harder for me than it was in the past because of the battles that I've been through.
But I will also say that even if, it's more that, as you said, maybe harsh intimacy, I don't know what term we can come up with God, but more compassion and gentleness towards others that I've seen because of having suffered, and then just
So
more compassionate. towards
Norrine and I
others.
did sit down and make a list one time of what are the good things that came out of this suffering, not the prayer movements and all that, but just in our own lives. And one of those is that, before, when someone would come to Turkey and I'd talk with them, they'd express their concerns, their anxiety about coming into work in a Muslim country. Yeah, and I'd say, you know what? This is the mentality you need to come. Plan on dying here. Just plan that you'll be killed. Come over with that mentality and you'll be okay, because probably nothing's going to happen to you, but go ahead and assume that it will and deal with all the emotions. And I would say that to them, and the woman would cry and the men would come, And you know what? Now I might still say the same thing, but with a very different attitude, because now that I've suffered and broken, I have more compassion and more understanding of weakness. So I'd say it with a lot more humility. Just, hey, there could be some hard things. You need to prepare your heart for it. So I'm still speaking the truth, but I'm saying, yeah, it's hard. It can be difficult. But with more gentle and compassionate. And I think suffering can bring us to that point where we carry more of the nature of Jesus. There's something I said I'm going to do it tomorrow, but I'm just going to do it right now since we're in the compassion field right now, is that I really came away with a sense that Jesus understands my weakness. And people say, oh, did you need to leave your shame behind? And I don't feel ashamed of my weakness in prison. It is what it is. I was weak and I broke. I'm not ashamed of it. I look back and what I really started to feel there was, Jesus understands my weakness. And I thought of all the advantages that Jesus had. I mentioned this briefly, but just think, he's in the garden. He knows he's returning to the glory he had before. He came, before the creation of the world. It says that in John 17. He knows that he's going back to heaven. I haven't seen heaven. I don't know what it's like. He knows. He also knew what was going to happen, how long it was going to last. He knows also what it's going to produce. Every person that's ever saved in history is saved in some way through an application of Jesus' death to that person. So just this huge result, amazing result. And yet, he's struggling. Oh, God, I'd rather not do this. Oh, God. And it's such agony and stress that he's sweating these huge drops. It says almost like drops of blood. That sounds like emotional agony to me. How can you be in agony, Jesus, when you know that what you're going to go through is going to save me? Don't other people sacrifice themselves for people? Why are you having such a hard time? I see him at his most human, at his most like me. And I thought, he suffered. He was in agony. He had a difficult time. And so he understands me. If he had this with all of the knowledge that he had, of course it's difficult for us. And he understands this. And the Bible says, because we have a high priest who suffered, then he has compassion for us. And someone had a prophetic picture for me that really touched me, that Norrine passed on to me. And she saw me in the cell. I think she was having a vision or something. And she saw me in the cell, and I'm on the ground, and Jesus is in the cell with me. And she says, why doesn't Andrew get up? You're in the cell. Why doesn't he stand up? And Jesus said to her, he can't stand up. His legs are broken. And that really touched me, because that's how I felt. I can hardly stand. I'm weak. And Jesus is acknowledging it. He's saying, yeah, he's having a really hard time. His legs are broken. He can't stand up right now. He understood my weakness. And so even as we go through difficulties and struggle with doubts and questions and confusion, I can just rest in that and say, you understand me, Jesus. And he's full of compassion for me. I hope that's encouraging to you in your own weakness.
Hi.
Now I have nothing left to say tomorrow.
Thank you for speaking to when you want God to move in a certain way or expect him to according to your understanding of the word. And in times when we could be disappointed, that we hold on to the fact that what we know about him and our past relationship is true. He's always faithful. He's always just. He has purposes, and we just choose to believe. My question to you is, before your experience in prison and after, can you compare and can you speak into the fact that there are times when God does move according to our understanding of the word and in power? In your church in Turkey, aside from salvation, which is the most important thing, did you see blind eyes open? Did you see healings? Did you see financial benefits for the believers there, protection from government? And then afterwards, did you see the power of God on your life or other believers? Or did it change how you prayed? Like when you pray for healing now, is it like, well, I'm not sure. Did he pay for the price of healing now that I've been through this? I'm wondering before and after. And can you speak to anything as far as how you've seen God move in a way you would have expected him to move positively?
Yeah, so we did see a powerful move of God in our church. But it's not, there are a lot of befores and afters. He moved powerfully and then he didn't. And then that would put me into like, oh, I'm focused on what God isn't doing rather than what he did in the past because he isn't doing it now. And that would discourage me and, kind of not expect as much from God. And so I was in a cycle like that. And then in 2007, we began to expect a lot more. We began to see a lot more. But we did see miracles. We did see healings, but not all the time. I can tell you what changed in me when I had some encounters with the Lord that really changed. The Lord took me away from, I have theological training, and I would sit down and I could tell you all the reasons why God doesn't heal. And I think I could still do the same thing and still say these are the reasons why, or God doesn't always heal. I don't understand why. But I began to pray for people after this encounter with God, not from my mind, but from I went into a time when God was developing my spirit, I could say. And I began to have a lot higher expectation, but it wasn't something intellectual because I still see that God doesn't heal all the time. And there are a lot of questions. And I love Randy Clark, if you've ever heard him, tremendous healing ministry. He'll tell you the same thing. I don't know. But if we're not going after the miracles, we don't see them. If we don't have expectation, God moves a lot less in our midst. But you also have to deal with the reality that the kingdom has not come fully yet, and there is a tension, and maintain that pursuit of the supernatural, of presence, of miracles, at the same time learning to guard our hearts and not lose that sense of expectation when things don't happen the way that we think they should or the way that we think God says they're going to. And there's always a tension. Coming out of prison, because I was so focused on what I already described before, that perseverance and faithfulness, which is very gritty and I would say harsh. God actually did an amazing thing in getting me out. It was kind of miraculous. But I think I was less focused on the supernatural.
Well, and also, you came out and you never went back to the church.
I never went back to church.
You were on house arrest and then immediately out of the country, so you were never back in our church again to lead it.
But I'll tell you what I expect. I think that a lot of the healing and miracles, obviously, it has something to do with our pursuit and openness and desire for them. There's also the sovereignty of God that sometimes God says, now, and there is just an increase. And I think that we're coming into a period where what we've seen up until now is more of a practice run or, the God giving good signs throughout time, but we're coming into a time when, for whatever reasons, I can think of several, but that we're going to see a great increase in glory and power in the church. And this has to do not necessarily with us wanting it more, but it has to do with the timing of God's purposes and what he's doing in the kingdom. But we do need to prepare ourselves so that we can carry those things.
So I just wanted to go back and say from about 2007 or 8 until the imprisonment, actually, there was a move of God. We did see the Lord work with Muslims, giving them encounters, healing them. The biggest healing, actually, we just heard recently that somebody who was deaf, that had an ear that was open and came to faith a couple months ago in that church. The biggest miracle was there was somebody who was visiting at the conference, and a girl that we know personally, we know the family. She has rods up her back because of a surgery, and she now bends regularly.
She couldn't bend before, but now she could bend completely, and so they went and did a scan. The rods are still there.
Because they were so sure that God had somehow removed it. No, they're still there.
They're still there, but now, and they weren't flexible rods. But now she's bending. So how did that happen? We don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, God is really doing a lot in the Muslim world. He really, really is touching them and healing them. And keep praying, because there's a big move coming there.
Yeah. See, if I'm with the Presbyterians, I'm going to say, guys, you need to go after the power of God and supernatural. If I'm with the Charismatics, I'm going to say, you need to prepare your hearts. So that, when you have disappointment, you still keep going after it. So I'm just going to say one final thing, is that this has helped me. Is someone described this? It came from who knows how far back it goes in the Turkish church, with just people who've been from historic Christians there, not Muslim background. But someone said, the Bible is like a pharmacy. It's full of different medicines. But you have to give the right medicine at the right time. And if you give the wrong one, it can be deadly. And you have to give the right one. And I've used this many times. If someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I'm going to lose my salvation. And, I say, no, what God wants to reassure you. And if someone is living like hell thinking they can go to heaven, I'm going to say, you know what? There are verses in the Bible that you should be really concerned about. They're both true. They're both medicine, but you have to apply it at the right time. And so I would say the same thing about the miraculous and healing and all these things. You use the right teaching at the right time. And think of that pharmacy, that there's often a tension between these.
Wow, amen. Thank you. Can we just say thank you? I think we could probably go for hours. I have so many questions myself. Just the whole process. I know in the book you talked about sanctions and some of the animosity that grew just in the general population because their economy was so badly hit and affected, and they're blaming it on you, which is ridiculous, but it is what it is. And so now you're not just having the government angry, now you have the general public angry. So many things, but I so appreciate the balance that you walk in. Like you have opportunity to be extreme one direction or another, and I really sense the Lord has brought such a wholeness to your message and to what you walk in, and I so admire that. We are going to break for lunch, and then our plan is we're going to begin promptly at 2 or 1:59. So what I want to do, though, is receive an offering that's going to help cover some of the costs for today. We try to do these conferences at no cost for tickets. We don't ever do these things as a fundraiser. I've never sensed that from the Lord. Let's do this and make money. That's not what we're doing. But we also don't necessarily want to go backwards in the process. So the Lord knows what we need. It costs a lot to travel. It costs a lot to be in ministry. And it is what it is. So we want to bless them and cover their expenses as well as Wally's as well as we can. So ushers, I don't know if you're ready, if you're able to come, and we just want to receive that now. If you want to give using a card, that is going to be set up in the foyer, and at any point during this time, that's going to be available. You can go and someone will help you with that. So Lord, right now, I just say thank you for the gift that you've brought to this place. I thank you for your word and for your heart that's so been revealed at another level to a deeper capacity than what we have known. And God, I pray right now that as we give into your kingdom, that these are offerings that we give sacrificially, knowing that you will use them to increase your kingdom. I thank you that we have more than enough and that you've given us the privilege of giving. So now, Lord, would you minister to each heart, that we would only give what you assign us to give. And we trust you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.